Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a story today that's got it all. Military showdowns, religious reforms, even a king facing death. Intrigued?
That would be.
Well, get ready, because we're taking a deep dive into the life and times of King Hezekiah from the Bible. Specifically, we'll be looking at 2 Kings, chapters 18 through 20.
Ah, Hezekiah. Quite a figure, really. He becomes king at just 25. Talk about pressure. Imagine stepping into leadership with massive threats and personal struggles all around you.
It's almost hard to imagine, like leading a startup, but your startup is an ancient kingdom surrounded by empires.
Exactly. And the sources really emphasize Hezekiah's faith, even from a young age. It seems that played a big part in how he handled things.
So we've got a young king, strong faith. Where do we start with his story?
Well, Hezekiah's faith wasn't just a personal thing. It really guided his actions as king. In fact, one of the first things he does is launch some major religious reforms.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, he goes all in removing pagan shrines, idols, really anything that might distract from worshiping the one true God.
Wow, that's a bold move. Not everyone would be on board with that, right? I mean, changing traditions can be a really sensitive thing.
You're absolutely right. It rarely comes easy. But Hezekiah was determined to purify the religious practices in Judah. And I think the most striking example of this is his destruction of the bronze serpent.
The bronze serpent. Oh, right. The one from the book of Numbers. Moses made it to heal people from snake bites.
That's the one. But over time, people began to worship the serpent itself. And Hezekiah saw this as idolatry and had it destroyed. Can you imagine a relic with that much history gone?
It's a powerful statement. It's like sometimes you have to let go of things we're attached to, no matter how meaningful, to stay true to your values.
It definitely takes courage, especially with something as deeply rooted as religion. And for Hezekiah, it was more than just personal conviction. It was about his leadership. He was responsible for the spiritual well-being of his nation, setting the tone, leading by example.
Yeah.
Leading by example. Okay, so religious reforms are in full swing. But I have a feeling things are about to get a bit more intense.
You're right to think that, because enter the Assyrians, an empire known for its military might.
Oh, yes. The Assyrians. That was a major power back then, right?
Absolutely. And they wanted to expand their territory, which led them right to Judah's doorstep.
Uh-oh.
Leading the Assyrian army is King Sennacherib. This guy wasn't big on diplomacy.
Really?
Instead of negotiating, Sennacherib sends messengers to Jerusalem with a pretty blunt message: surrender or face destruction.
Straight to the point. So how does Hezekiah respond to this? Does he give in or hold his ground?
Hezekiah doesn't back down easily. He turns to prayer, seeking guidance from God. He also consults the prophet Isaiah.
So even in a position of power, he recognizes there are forces larger than himself. It's a good reminder, isn't it? Sometimes seeking wisdom from something greater is the best move. Absolutely, and it's humbling. He doesn't let pride or fear stop him from seeking help. But this story doesn't exactly end with a peaceful negotiation. This is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So the sources describe this incredible event. It's like something out of a movie. An angel of the Lord appears at the Assyrian camp, and overnight, 185,000 soldiers are struck down.
185,000. Just like that.
It's described as divine intervention. It's like a moment where the power of God just breaks into human affairs. And it really makes you think, what does this mean for faith? Do these kinds of events still happen today?
It is a pretty wild thing to think about. Should we be waiting for angels to solve all our problems?
Well, probably not, but maybe it's more about recognizing those unexpected moments where something we can't explain changes everything.
That's a good way to put it. Being open to the possibility of something bigger at work.
Exactly. And imagine being Hezekiah. He prays, seeks guidance, and then boom, this extraordinary event. A testament to faith, but also a reminder that the way things work out can be unexpected, to say the least.
Unexpected is an understatement. But now let's shift gears a bit, because Hezekiah's story isn't all about battles and miracles. He also faces a very human challenge.
Oh.
A life-threatening illness.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. The text tells us that Hezekiah falls ill, and it's serious. So serious, in fact, that the prophet Isaiah comes to him and says, "Get your affairs in order. You're going to die."
Wow, what a heavy message, especially after everything he's already faced.
It shows that no matter who you are, life can be fragile. And it really makes you wonder, how does Hezekiah respond? Does he accept this? Or does he fight for his life?
So what does he do? He chooses to fight.
Right.
Once again, he turns to prayer. But this time, it's not about thanking God or asking for direction. This is raw, a desperate plea. Hezekiah bargains with God, reminds him of his faithfulness, and begs for a chance to keep living. It's not just a king clinging to power. It's a man facing his own mortality.
Absolutely. It's powerful, this vulnerability. And so, what happens? Does God answer his prayer?
He does. Isaiah returns to Hezekiah with incredible news. God heard him, and he's giving him 15 more years.
15 years. Wow, that's incredible.
It is. And as if that wasn't enough, God provides a sign to back up his promise.
A sign.
Yeah, the shadow on a sundial, a physical representation of time. It moves backwards 10 steps.
Hold on. Time going backwards. That's not something you see every day.
It really is a powerful image, the power of God disrupting the natural order of things. Like, God is in control. Even time bends to his will.
I like that. But this sundial, could it symbolize something else too?
Definitely. Think about it. The sundial measures time passing. It reminds us of how short life is. But the shadow moving back suggests that those limits, maybe they aren't absolute.
I see what you mean. It's like a symbol of hope, second chances.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how Hezekiah spent those extra 15 years. Did he learn from what happened? Did he grow as a leader? I guess that's what we'll explore next.
Because I'm guessing this story is far from over.
Right. Oh, it's not over. There are more trials and triumphs to come. They all shape Hezekiah's life, and the fate of Judah too, and there are definitely more twists and turns ahead.
Okay, so we've seen Hezekiah face the Assyrian army and overcome a deadly illness. You might think that's the happy ending, right?
Yeah, you might think so. The good guy wins, everyone's happy.
But life's rarely that simple, is it? Yeah. Especially for leaders.
Right, and for Hezekiah, the next challenge doesn't come from an enemy army or sickness. It comes from, himself.
Oh.
The sources tell us about an event that shows a different side of him, a side that has some pretty big consequences.
Okay, now I'm really curious. We've seen his strength, his faith. What could possibly trip him up?
So imagine this. Hezekiah has recovered from his illness, right? He's got 15 more years. Things are going well in Judah. Then a group of envoys arrives from Babylon.
Babylon. That was a rising power at the time, wasn't it?
It was. And they were probably checking out Judah, its strengths, its resources, maybe even seeing them as a potential target.
Oh, I see. So this wasn't just a friendly visit.
Right. And how does Hezekiah react? He decides to show off, gives them a grand tour of his palace, his treasury, all his riches.
Sound like a bit of pride creeping in. Maybe you wanted to intimidate them, show them Judah wasn't weak.
Maybe. Maybe it was strategic. But the prophet Isaiah doesn't see it that way. He confronts Hezekiah about it, warns him about the consequences.
I bet that wasn't a fun conversation. What did Isaiah say?
Isaiah gives him a prophecy, a chilling prediction. He says everything Hezekiah showed off, his treasures, his palace, even his descendants, will be taken to Babylon.
Wow. Talk about a reality check. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. It's strange, isn't it? Even after all the divine intervention, the miracle, he still gives in to pride.
It really shows that none of us are immune to it. Pride can sneak in, even when we're feeling humble, especially when we're successful. And it often leads to decisions we end up regretting.
So what's the takeaway here? Should we never celebrate our achievements?
No, it's not about hiding what we've done. It's about gratitude, remembering where it all comes from, recognizing that our talents, opportunities, they're not all our own doing.
It's about balance.
Right. And about using what we have wisely, not for bragging rights, but for the good of others.
Makes sense. Finding that sweet spot between being proud of ourselves and not letting it go to our heads.
Exactly. Real strength is about humility, knowing we're part of something bigger. And this isn't just for kings and leaders, it's for all of us.
So Hezekiah's story is a roller coaster. Faith, courage, facing death.
Yeah.
But he's human, makes mistakes.
It's what makes his story so interesting. It's not just good versus evil, It's about being human with all the messy stuff that comes with it.
And it makes us think. How do we balance confidence and humility?
Yeah.
How do we use what we have for good? How do we stay true to ourselves when things get tough?
Big questions, right. And Hezekiah's story makes us face those questions.
It's amazing how these ancient stories still resonate today, isn't it?
Absolutely. The details might be different, but faith, leadership, what it means to be human, it's all still relevant.
Totally. But there's still more to Hezekiah's story, more to uncover.
Oh, yeah. More twists and turns. We'll delve deeper into his leadership, how faith and actions intertwine, and how these old stories still speak to us today.
Can't wait to dive back in. How about you, listeners? Ready for more? We're about to uncover even more about Hezekiah's reign, the legacy he left. Stay with us.
So we left off talking about Hezekiah's pride and that prophecy from Isaiah. Remember, Isaiah warned that everything he showed off to those Babylonian envoys, well, it would all be taken to Babylon one day.
Right. A pretty chilling prediction, but does it actually happen?
Well, that prophecy isn't just left hanging. It sets off a chain of events that really impact Judah's future.
So even though Hezekiah experiences those amazing miracles, there's this sense of impending doom in the background.
Yeah, like dramatic irony, you know? We know what's coming, but the characters are still living it, making choices that'll shape their destiny.
That's a great way to put it. It makes you think. Did Hezekiah ever regret what he did? Realize that his pride might have something to do with the trouble brewing?
That's a good question. The text doesn't really say anything about Hezekiah's feelings, but it does show us what happens because of his choices and the consequences. Well, they last a lot longer than his lifetime.
That's a powerful thought. It's like one action can have this ripple effect, changing things for generations.
It's a theme that pops up a lot in the Bible, and in history, too. Our lives, our choices are all connected. They impact everyone around us.
So Hezekiah's story isn't just about faith and victory. It's more complex than that. It's about human nature, leadership, and how divine will and human choices all mix together.
Exactly. It makes us think about what we do, even when we have good intentions, because sometimes our actions have consequences we don't see right away.
It also makes you realize that we all have our own part to play in the bigger story.
Right. Our choices, our values, they all shape our story, just like they shaped Hezekiah's. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Hezekiah's life, what are some key things we can take away? What can we learn from him, from his successes and failures?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Well, first, I think Hezekiah's story shows us that faith is powerful. It can give you strength when you're struggling, hope when things seem dark, and guidance when you're lost.
And Hezekiah didn't just sit around waiting for a miracle. He actively sought guidance, made tough choices, and prayed when he needed help.
Right. He lived his faith. And maybe we won't see miracles like he did, but we can still learn from his commitment. We can find our own ways to connect with something bigger than ourselves.
And I think Hezekiah's story also shows how important humility is. He had divine favor, accomplished amazing things, but then pride got in the way, and it had big consequences.
It's a reminder that no matter what we achieve, staying humble is key. Be grateful for what you have. Use your talents wisely.
So, to sum it all up, faith, humility, and remembering that our choices have a ripple effect. Hezekiah's story is about living our lives with purpose, integrity, and staying connected to something bigger than ourselves.
Well said. I hope everyone listening will explore Hezekiah's story more on their own, find the own meaning in it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep searching for those bits of wisdom that help us navigate life.
It's been a pleasure joining you all on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time for another fascinating deep dive.